The rivalry between Martin Nyrop and Anton Rosen is probably best summed up by the comment that Martin Nyrop made while constructing the town hall. Rosen was at the time constructing the Palace Hotel just across the street, and Nyrop, to his face, called this building a donkey's ass. Rosen, however, got the last laugh because he was the one who was asked to design the pillar for the sculpture placed right between the two buildings. It's not the only place in town where their buildings are in close proximity. One of the first buildings that Nyrop designed was the big gas container for the gasworks. Although every town of any importance had its own gasworks, very little of this remains. They couldn't wait to get rid of them once that electricity won over. But when you have this large building designed by a great architect, well, you have to do something about it, and now it operates as a theater. And just down the street, Rosen designed these residential buildings. The access to the gasworks is just to the left of the building. Whether it was because or despite of them both being eminent architects operating in the same area at the same time and mostly in the same style, these two guys hated each other. This personal animosity led both of them to both say and do things just to spite each other, and that despite them being both pupils of Wilhelm Dallop. Dallop was an exponent for the collaboration between architects, but these two guys could never get around to doing that. But let's look at their individual works. An area where they both excelled were villas. The following examples are all from the same neighborhood, Frederiksberg. Hard-pressed by surrounding more modern building and later additions to the Italianate, you can still discern the original meaning here. If you didn't know better, you'd think he was inspired by Friedrich Jablonski's railway buildings in Schleswig. It has a distinctive German look. Although later altered by Herr Kampmann, you can still discern the original Italian design for this one. Built for the manager of the metal company Aluminia, the house had been completely severed from the street that it stumbled on. Note the window to the far left on the second floor, identical to one used by Nyrop at Fasanvej. One of Martin Nyrop's early public works was that for the regional archives. The windows are long and narrow to facilitate the placement of the vast number of bookshelves that was needed in an archive. When he was tasked with adding a tower for the already existing church, he sought Italian inspiration for campaniles. The inspiration for this church is the one at Tvej Merløse, and this is closely associated with some of the heroes of Gesta Danorum by Saxo Grammaticus, and those same heroes have given names to streets in the vicinity. The shape of the building site made it a challenge to fill it with a church commemorating the 4th centenary of Martin Luther. Don't be fooled by the perspective. There is a body of water between the bridge and the row of houses behind. Something mundane as a factory was not something that Martin Nyrop would usually do, but in this case it was a family business. Nyrop's by the far largest project was that of the new hospital at Bispebjerg. In the fashion of the time, it was divided into a number of pavilions, which on the one hand made it spread out over a large area, but on the other hand also made it easier to accommodate new technology and other developments in society so that you can replace it piecemeal when development required it. It speaks to his capabilities that at Bispebjerg this had usually been done by addition rather than subtraction, and still he could not deny his Italian inspiration. A frequent feature of Rosen's architecture is not using protruding balconies, but instead making them into a kind of alcoves. This is a good example, and you should also note the coloring of the back wall here. The large arched window panes employed in the previous example has been taken to extreme here on a rather busy corner. The receding balcony could even be used with factory buildings, although on the very same street he also employed Neo-Renaissance or full-scale Art Nouveau right down to the use of font. Another fine example of the use of Art Nouveau elements, this time for residential buildings. Compared to that, this example of Olsen's work seems rather drab and boring. Well, sometimes boring is just good enough when we are talking about a factory in the backwaters of the suburbs. The last example is the historicism employed here in the administrative building of one of the big breweries.